Let's get started. Hopefully you had a chance to take a look at the demos, the full suite of tools we've got downstairs. There'll be a couple more breaks ahead of us. Between here and lunch, we're talking about cybersecurity. And so first up, we've actually got a couple sessions here in a row. But first up, I want to bring up and introduce Michael Gregg, Chief Information Security Officer for the State of North Dakota. Michael is going to share a little bit about how important we and they view cybersecurity in this space, and he'll tell you a little bit about his role inside of the State of North Dakota, but he's leading the direction for that cybersecurity team. And so, Michael, welcome to the stage, and thanks for being a part of this and serving our great state of North Dakota.
Thank you. Good morning. How's everyone? Everybody hear me okay? Talk a little bit this morning about cybersecurity, and then talk about how cybersecurity relates to the agricultural piece. So I'll give a little bit about some background first as far as what I do with the great state of North Dakota, and then we'll look and we'll pivot some toward agriculture. So I kind of titled this Ripe for Picking. It's what I put in for a subtitle for this. So North Dakota is not a small state network. As far as state networks go, North Dakota is the largest, as far as I know, state network in the United States. We're about 250,000 endpoints. So as far as state networks, we are one of the very largest. This really started around 2018, 2019, when we started this unification process. Two started unification. The other one was with the great state of North Dakota is early on, there was the foresight and vision to run broadband every home in the state. So literally almost every home in the state has gigabit broadband or greater, which many other states do not. So that's one of the big things out of this. One of the other things that we've seen out of this is just the huge number of attacks. So if you think as far as from what we see incident-wise, it's about 4.5 billion incidents per year. I'll repeat that, 4.5 billion incidents per year. And out of that 4.5 billion incidents per year that we see, the stuff that's not automatically dealt with is around 50,000. So my team, which is about 55 people with full-time employees, work about 50,000 incidents per year, each and every year. So that's some of the load that these folks work with. So I just kind of start off, and what I would say is the first thing to think about, not only from my standpoint, as far as what's the vision, it's what's your vision. And I've heard some of these same themes discussed this morning as far as what's the vision and how you get there. And what I would ask is you think about this vision and what you want to achieve, think of building or baking in security to begin with. The sooner you can bake in security and the sooner you can think about doing things securely early on, when you get ready to buy new products, new software, you change procedures, you change processes, whatever you happen to do, it's easier to do. It's much easier to build it in to begin with than it is trying to bake it in later after the product is completed or after the product's actually finished. So what we've actually done is we've worked very hard over the last 3 years that I've pretty well been in this role as far as really developing and laying out what we want to do and how we want to get there. So we set up a mission and a vision early on, and for us, it's really came down to things like, what do we need to do for our customers? What about for our employers? What does our leadership want for this? How can we put this together all into a mission statement? And that mission statement is just used to kind of help drive people to understand the purpose of the organization. You know, like Bill Gates with Microsoft when they started, their mission statement was easy. It's have a computer in every house running Microsoft products. That's their mission statement. That's it. Computer in every house running Microsoft products, which I would say pretty well they've done. They've done a good job at that. We actually use something called OKRs, which are objectives and key results. So what we do is we look at out of a period of about a year that this next year we're going through, and then we break that out into these 3-month periods. And out of these 3-month periods, we can tie back that vision and that mission to that actual action plan as far as what we want to do. So as I said, our goal is to protect those 250,000 endpoints we have, to prevent the state from having any types of attacks, any successful attacks, anything against the state. So as an example, just earlier this year, we were hit with one, Log4j, which was really worldwide. And in this particular vulnerability with Log4j, there were some that were completely knocked offline. Some provinces, like the province of Ontario, shut down all their provincial servers. So over 4,000 servers they actually turned off for a period of days or weeks because they didn't know what services would work securely and which ones wouldn't. So if you needed to get a driver's license, if you needed to get something as far as maybe like a hunting license, you needed to get their new plates for your vehicle, you couldn't do it. In the state of North Dakota, we brought no systems offline. Because of the work we'd done ahead of time, we're actually able to identify potentially where those vulnerabilities were, able to address those vulnerabilities very quickly. So the first thing you're going to need is you're going to need to have some type of framework. And I'm not going to talk a lot about framework, but I'm just going to say this. There's a lot of frameworks out there, but if you don't pick a framework and you don't have a framework to do this stuff, then you're going to be left at the end of this, which is going to be respond and recover. And respond and recover is where most organizations live. They may tell you they don't live there, but that's where they live. And what I mean by that is they're left finding out something bad happens, trying to deal with that, trying to recover from it, and then by then they're going into the next bad thing. You've got to move over here to identify, protect, and detect. That's the piece you've got to move to. So think of it as an analogy like this. I was in Houston and lived in Houston actually during the Katrina timeframe. And before Katrina actually hit, there was a big concern that it was going to be Houston that was impacted by this. So they got ready to really evacuate everyone out of Houston. And during the evacuation, people ran out of gas on the side of the road. People literally had heart attacks and passed away from the heat. They had a fire on a bus that had elderly people in it, and people died from it. There were multiple bad things that happened. They couldn't get all the people out of the city because they'd never planned for this before. They'd never planned for it, didn't have a plan in place. But I would say this, out of Katrina, what did actually happen good for the state of Texas? Well, they said, we need a better plan. So going forward after that, they put in contra lanes. They put in where they could open up both sides of the freeway to get people out. They come up with plans to evacuate the city in stages over time, not all at once. And then when we had the next several events after that, and the next big hurricane, the next big storm, the state was much better prepared for it. But what it actually took was that point where something bad happened, and then we started to learn from that event and make that change. What you want to do is you want to shift back over to this, identify and protect before those bad things happen. That's what it comes down to at the end of the day. When are we going to make the change? Are we going to make the change beforehand, or are we going to make the change after this bad event has occurred? So with hacking agriculture, agriculture's come a long way in the last 100 years, hasn't it? I love this photo of 100 years back in the 1920s with this kind of hand-pushed tractor that they had. And then you look at what we've got now, and I mean, this is not even the biggest, but we see this John Deere, what is the 7450? You have remote control from that, GPS, all these other types of neat, cool things you can do with it. And that technology has grown exponentially as far as what's there. But what hasn't changed is the mindset. Agriculture is 1/5 of the output of this country. 1/5, that's 20% of the economy, is the agricultural portion of it. When we look at that, we may say, why would agriculture be a target? Why would threat actors go after them? But these guys don't care. It's just about monetizing and how they can make money and who they can make money from. So for them, this is truly a target and a threat vector that's ripe for picking for these individuals. So one example is ransomware. Now, if you were to ask me what's ransomware, ransomware is just very basically, they're going to lock up your files. They're going to lock up your files, they're going to lock up all your data, and historically what they'd do is they'd say, you need to pay us. And when you pay us, we'll give your data back. Maybe, maybe not. And then you know what they learned? They learned, well, we can not only monetize and get money from locking up this data and getting people to pay, but you know what? We can put all their data out on the dark web, and we can monetize it a second time. So if they have PII, if they have social security numbers, if they have credit card numbers, if they have any other type of data, passwords, we can monetize that and sell it all out on the dark web and sell that information. Like for the state of North Dakota, we've got about 10,000 employees, either current or past employees for the state of North Dakota, that we have found information related to them on the dark web. That could be simply usernames, passwords, social security numbers, credit card numbers, other types of data through other breaches that have occurred over the years. So my point is, when they get this data, they're not only going to lock it up, they're going to take a copy of that data and they're going to monetize it however they can. So they're going to do what they can to get their money from this. Now you may ask, what if I pay them? Am I going to get my data back? Maybe, maybe not. It just all depends. Maybe you're not even paying the right ones. It could very well be that it's another group that's come in that said they have your data and they don't even have your data and they get the money and then they just leave. So maybe you get the information, maybe you don't get it back, maybe they unlock the files. Some states have actually moved to make it illegal now for state entities to actually pay for ransomware. North Dakota's not done that yet, but it is one of the things states are starting to do, is actually make that illegal and not allow any state entities to pay for this. The cost of ransomware insurance and for recovery of a breach has more than doubled in the last year. Average cost used to be about $750 million. Now it's about 1.5, It's about 1.5, so it's roughly doubled in the last year what has to be paid for this. And so what really happens to the agricultural sector? Are they hit by this? Do they see these things? Well, sure enough, if you look back to just April this year, the FBI put out a report, and the FBI's report that they put out, they said, you know what? Agriculture could very well be at risk. This is something that could be at risk. And not even a month later in May, you can see AGCO was hit, revenue over $9 billion, make a lot of different farm equipment and gear that many of you are probably familiar with. And these folks were hit with a very large ransomware attack. Not just them. We see meat processing plants, JBS, they've been hit. And the thing is, when these threat actors see that people are hit with this and they actually pay, we've only encouraged them now because they've said, hey, these guys will pay, so maybe we should hit these guys and these guys too because maybe they'll pay too. That's all that's going to happen out of this. So much of this that we see is driven by that continued view from the attackers that if they're going to pay for this, we're only going to hit them that much more. And they're not the only ones that have been hit. Cooperatives like New Cooperative, they were hit in 2021. They paid, it's believed, $5.9 million in ransomware is what they paid. Whether they got all the data back or not depends on which report you actually look at. Crystal Valley, another co-op, they were also hit with ransomware. So this is something that impacts the agricultural sector and something they will or you will have to deal with if not yet. So JBS was the one that I mentioned previously with JBS, and in this, folks, they paid about $11 million to get that data back and to try to keep that information from being publicly leaked. The CEO at the time actually said, you know what? This was a difficult decision, but one we feel like we've had to make. Paying that ransom, I will tell you again, will only encourage these individuals to come more aggressively after you and your sector than not paying it. So that's a big one to think about out of this. And it's not just agriculture, or not just ransomware. One that's just as scary to me is denial of service. And denial of service I see as even one that could potentially impact growers, farmers, ranchers, others even more. So as an example, let's look at what's going on between Ukraine and Russia. So part of what's going on with Ukraine and Russia, Russia was able to get access to some tractors, equipment. They moved that stuff back to Chechnya, moved it back close to Grozny, the capital there. They got those systems there, and guess what? None of them would start. None of them would run, because why? The manufacturer had remotely turned those tractors and turned those devices off. Now that's cool from the standpoint that they were able to prevent the aggressor, Russia in this case, from being able to use that equipment. But what if? What if someone got access to those same controls, and when somebody got access to those same controls, right before it's time to plant, they disable all the equipment? What if when it's time to harvest, they disable all the equipment, and at that point they demand tens of millions of dollars to turn it back on? What would be the impact, or what would be the result of that? This ability to remotely disable and to pull this equipment offline is a very real possibility. And the more closely we integrate systems to the internet and to the public network, the more we have to look at how we have controls in place to keep this from happening. So it's good if we can do this to keep the Russians or others from stealing equipment. Not so good if it was to happen to us on a large scale. So what do we got to do? I would put that down into three big basic areas. People, process, technology. That's it. People, process, technology. These are three big areas that we can work on. First, by people, hire security people, bring them in, get them involved. If you don't have security people on your team, get them involved. It's well worth the cost early on as you start to develop new processes, new products, new procedures. Have them integrated with those teams where they can find solutions to security problems early on and potentially patch or fix those. Much easier to fix it up front than to do it afterwards. Think of it the same way as if you're building a car. If you're building a car and you can build in those fixes at the time you manufacture the car, the cost is low. If not, and later you have a recall on that vehicle and you have to do it a year, 2 years, 3 years later and recall them for something, much greater cost. Other one is bring in pen testers. One of the things we do is we have a team of individuals that just go out and they pen test environments, which means they ethically hack. They're just like bad guys. I've got a couple of them back here in the corner, I think back here from our team today. And what they do is they look at a network the same way attackers look at it. Ever see those shows where they have somebody come to the house and they say, how would you break in the house? And the guy's like a former robber or crook, and he's done jail time, and they're going to have him say, hey, I could go in through the window, I could break in the door, here's what I would do. This is the same thing the pen testers do. They look at the network from an adversarial standpoint. They say, what could I do? What could I get access to? How much damage could I cause? And by doing this, they can up front help find those pathways to those items like denial of service and ransomware that would be there, and help you seal those and cut those off before the real threat actor comes in and demands millions of dollars to prevent this. That's one of the key big ones. Another one is recruit and use bug bounty hunters. And bug bounty hunters are just people that are looking for problems with code, looking for problems with applications, but instead of putting that on the dark web and selling it out, they're going to tell you. What do they want for this? Sometimes they just want credit, that they were the ones that found it. Sometimes they may ask for something in return, a small amount of money, small things they may want for this. But you're actually paying these people that are like hackers to look at it and find these problems before the bad guys do. And as an example, United Airlines, they had a problem in their website that could have caused a massive security breach. They had 2 bug bounty hunters actually find this problem. They took it to United, and United Airlines said, you know what, we're going to give you both 1 million miles each. And they were thrilled out of this, and I would be too. But this is kind of during the whole, COVID thing, so it's like, did you really want to get 1 million miles? Because where are you going to fly right now, right? And did you make sure that when they give you those miles, they didn't expire? Because they'd be like, I'll take the miles, but I want to make sure they're not going to expire for the next couple of years before I can use them. But the idea is that they've paid these people either through a small amount of money or by giving them recognition or something from the organization to find these problems and report them to you before they report them to the bad guys. And that's one of the key things you can do with this, is get them involved. One of the things the State of North Dakota actually does is this last year, we had the first ever cyber challenge. So we've got a K through 12 program now, where from kindergarten to 12th grade, at every age, we're training our young students, our future leaders, cybersecurity. Every year, they get cyber. And then we bring them in high school, and we can say, you know what, let's have a challenge. Let's see who can out-hack, out-code, outdo this stuff securely over the others. So we'll have this pipeline of trained security professionals that can help with all this right here in the great state of North Dakota. And that's cool. I don't know of any other states that are doing this to the extent that we're doing this. Second piece is process. And by process, what I mean is shift this left, shift this left. So as an example, when I started with the state, I was very much on this protect, defend, recover type of mode. And we've shifted a lot of this left, meaning when the state gets ready to buy new applications or programs, we're looking at them up front and we're testing them. When we get information from cities or counties, they're worried about their profile, we go out and we ethically hack and see how secure they are. When we advertise on the web for what we're doing, sometimes we get information from bug bounty hunters that say, hey, we found a problem with something, and we're glad to give them credit for it, finding it, and saying they found it, and that they're good at what they do. So we're glad to do that. So part of that just comes down to basic things like passwords. If nothing else, change your passwords. Use different passwords for each site or application that you have. Use multi-factor authentication. I always tell people this over and over and over, but you would be amazed if you go out on the same dark web and you look, and you find a username and a password, that password may have been used in 4, 5, or 6, or 10, or 12 other locations. And what the threat actors do is they just take that information and they do something called credential stuffing. So they take that username and password and they stick it in every other site they can think of and see if you've used those credentials somewhere else. So different credentials for every site. Change those up. But if you do those things, you do things like separation of duties, you do security awareness training. These are all huge things that you can do to help with this. Technology is the other piece. You can build technology into anything, but is it something that really needs to be there? So for an example, I read earlier this year where the world's first Bluetooth toilet was hacked. And I thought, that's interesting. So they come up with the Bluetooth toilet that you can flush remotely. You can see how much water it's used. And it's kind of a cool technology, I guess, but did you really need that to be there? And if it breaks, who do you call? Do you call the plumber, or do you call the technician? Who works on this stuff, you know? Who replaces this even? So one is, do you have to have the technology there? But if you do, have you built in the security controls that are needed? And again, you want to do that up front. It's going to lower your cost, it's going to lower your expense of doing business, and it's going to build in those security controls to prevent these types of events that we've looked at, just with ransomware and denial of service, from being as easy to carry out or actually to happen. Finally is, can the environment be improved? I would say to a large part, yes, the environment can be improved. There are many things we can do to make changes. But part of that is going to mean that we have to have that paradigm shift. We have to see this as something that needs to be done, and we have to realize this needs to be done before the Katrina, before the JBS, before these events that have hit these co-ops. Because it's going to happen either way. The difference is, are we prepared for it, and have we prepared for these bad things before they've actually occurred? But sooner or later, we will have to deal with it. So look, that's about all I've got for you folks today. I would just say this: agriculture is no different than any other sector. I've worked in this business for over 25 years, and in the 25 years I've worked in cyber and written over 25 security books, some of them best-selling in their areas, is that all areas are at risk. No one is safe from this. It may not be that they're targeting you directly, but they may just be doing what's called spray and pray. They spray it out to everyone they can, and they pray that it fits with someone, that attack is successful, and they can monetize and make money off this. That's what they're looking to do. We've seen things before COVID, where during COVID, where we've had shortages on paper towels, shortages on other items. Don't think that it can't hit the agricultural sector too, because it can. That's a key part of our economy that we have, 20%. These controls are really great things that we can do for this. That's what I've got for you here today. Thank you very much for your time.
Michael. Thank you. Would you like to do some questions?
Sure.
We've got a little bit of time. If you've got questions for Michael, shout them out. I think it might be a good time to take some questions.
Yes, ma'am. Oh, that's a good one. Yeah, the question was from the audience: how do you describe white hat hacker? So I beat you to that one, sorry.
Tried.
Sorry, so if you think of hackers, they put hackers in different categories, and the bad guys, these are referred to as black hat hackers. White hat hackers are people that they're interested in this, they do it, but they want to do it for good. So as an example, they could be a bug bounty hunter, and they could say, hey, I found a problem with your application, and I really want to tell you about it because you should fix this because something bad would happen. That would be a white hat hacker. Or when I talked about pen testers and my team that I have like back at the back, these two guys in the back corner there, you could think of them as, are you guys white hat hackers? Yeah, most days is what Lucas said. They're considered white hat hackers because if they do a pen test, they actually go in and they're acting just like the bad guy would, the threat actor would act, or the black hat hacker, if I can get that out, but they don't cause any damage. They look to see where the problems are, how the problems could occur, and what it would take to fix those. Good question.
How do you find these white hat hackers? I mean, I feel like I'd go out and be like, hey, you want to do some nice hacking for me? And I'd hire the wrong person.
Well, we actually hire them, and one of the things that's unique about the state of North Dakota is we've worked very closely with NDUS, North Dakota University System, and also many of the tribal colleges. So what we're actually doing is we're making sure that these folks are not only trained in college, but when they're trained in college, they're ready to come out and they're able to come directly into those fields. So like, for example, in our teams, we have 3 or 4 different teams. We have a security analysis team. Those are like the firemen. They come out after an incident. We have a security infrastructure team. They deploy all the security tools. They deploy everything that's needed. And then we've got an active defense team. And that active defense team, that's those ethical hackers, the ones looking for problems in code, the ones doing that kind of stuff. So we're recruiting a lot of that stuff right out of school and trying to get it right out of school. And when we recruit for those specific jobs. And there is a lot of market for that stuff. It's a big market and it's growing. And it's a good field for people to be in, as far as a good way to make a living for your family. You got one back there.
Oh my goodness.
So if I'm an organization who hasn't spent much time thinking about cybersecurity up to this point, and I'm really motivated right now, what's the low-hanging fruit? What's the really important thing? Like, you got to do this right now that's very accomplishable and something I can tackle immediately.
So the question is, I got him excited, showing him about the ransomware and denial of service, got some interest, I can understand that, and then what are some things you can do as far as low-hanging fruit? The low-hanging fruit you can try to do is build this into your process up front. So, for example, and you're free to contact me afterwards. I'll provide you more information if you want. But the federal government has guidelines like NIST 853, which is a standard. So if you build or buy and you bring in new products, do they meet minimum security standards? Or if you're going to buy a product from a vendor, you ask the vendor up front in the contract, have you tested for basic security issues? Has that been tested for? So you can build into your contracts and build into your contracting process for when you bring on something new that there's a certain level of cybersecurity there built into that product. And if it's not, then you're not going to accept it. So this is one of the things you can do. Good question.
Can you speak to password apps or password software and management and why they're protected or why you're safe using those?
Yeah, that's a good question. So the question related to password apps, password management, and really it just comes down to this. There's no easy way for somebody to remember all the passwords they have to keep up with. There's no way to do it. Now, eventually, we'll be at the point through biometrics or things even like the gait, they can look at how you walk and determine whether or not it's you, that all this will be replaced. But in the meantime, till it does, you got to have some way to manage those passwords. Now, those password managers, there's different ones that are out there. Those password managers generally encrypt that data and they keep it in an encrypted file. They work different ways. Some of them put it on a server off somewhere else. Some of them keep it locally on your machine. But it's one way to keep it, and it is better than trying to remember all those. So they encrypt that data, and that encryption is what keeps that data safe, as long as they're using the right process for that. And there's KeyPass, there's LastPass, there's a lot of products out there that do that and do a fairly good job of it. Are they perfect? No, but it's much better than having that Post-it note on your computer that says your name and password underneath, and that's the same one used for 12 other sites. So it is much better than that. That's a good question, though.
Follow up on the educational part, and are you doing any ethics testing with that so that you aren't training the hackers of the future?
Yeah, we not only do a lot of ethics with that, but the other key piece that I would mention out of this that's kind of really key is training your employees, because we not only have a wide variety of tools like endpoint detection, vulnerability analysis tools that we use, but probably the most important tool that we use of all is our user awareness training. And for the state of North Dakota, we do 4 times a year short trainings. These trainings are maybe 10 minutes in length, but they're about phishing, business email compromise, protection of passwords, other items. And I've always gotten asked, does training your employees actually work? That's always what people ask me. They go, does it work? So I was lucky enough, actually, for the great state of North Dakota, we have a whole data division. We've got data scientists over there. And it's like, cool, data scientists. And so what I did was, we not only do the training, and we look to see who passes or fails the training, we take along with that, and the other thing we do is we send out these fake phishing emails. So we look to see who clicks on or who doesn't click on these fake phishing emails. What's the propensity that they'll actually click on this and execute it? And so I gave all this data to the data scientists. Data scientists actually looked at it, and they looked at correlation, and correlation can run from -1 to +1. We found about a 0.8 or 0.9 correlation between those that complete the training and don't click on the links. So my point is simply this: if you do even basic training with your employees, don't click on that link, be careful of opening that up, watch out for this. They do a much better job of observing those items and not carrying out those activities than if they never had the training at all. So one of the key things you can do is train your end users on security awareness. Even if you're not doing it now, start it as once a year and do something once a year, and then move it up to twice a year, move it up to once a quarter, and give them the training on that. Because most attacks we see come in through email. 50% of our load that we work in our shop comes in through email, and that's about right. And if you look at our email that comes in, out of all the emails that come into the state, somewhere around 85% of all the emails that come in are spam, phishing, or junk, and only about 10 or 15% are actual real email. So most of it is just stuff you don't even want anyway. But you can't filter all of it. Some of it's still going to get through, and that's where you got to have that employee that goes, don't think I should click on this. This is probably not a good idea. It's a good question.
With the new remote workforce, what are the things we should be sensitive to or prioritize with everybody working from home?
Well, that's a good question. With the new remote workforce, what are the things we have to prioritize for and be aware of? Here's what I'd say, just in my experience with that paradigm, because after COVID hit, we were actually able to send all of our workforce home for the state, do that in a very short period of time, in under a month, and pivot and have not only everyone work remotely, but also do it securely with things like MFA, multi-factor authentication. What we found out of that is it gave us some real advantages, because we can have people work from anywhere on whatever needs to be done. That's the good side. The bad side is anytime you start doing anything remotely, you're having to open up more ports, more protocols, more services to allow them to the outside. So you're allowing Zoom now, you're allowing Teams, you're allowing whatever else it may happen to be, WebEx, to come in and out. And the more of those things you open up, the more pathways the attacker has coming in. So those pathways are the things that you should look for. It's no different than the analogy I gave early on when you hire the bad guy to come out and look at your house or your property. He's going to say, I see there's 2 windows open here, over here now that weren't open before, and someone could get in through those. So that's it, is looking at those services and those things that are open to the network and trying to understand what impact that could have or how those could be misused. Hope that helps.
Hi, how does the conversation of our approach to cybersecurity change when we incorporate like blockchain and crypto technologies?
Oh, blockchain. With blockchain, there's a lot of things coming along with blockchain technology. I think really if you look at the state of North Dakota, one of the big things we've seen there is just the agreement in what the last few weeks with Kevin O'Leary. They're actually going to come in and build a facility here to do mining and other types of activity. The state's uniquely positioned for that because one of the things that we have here is not only ability to generate green power out of that, which is going to be used, but also even when they have this data centers create a lot of heat. You get a lot of computers running. That's going to be then taken and moved up to a second floor, and they're going to use that for a greenhouse internally. So this is really kind of cutting edge thing. But as far as from the cyber standpoint, the big use is there, the cloud, again, what's open, those services that are open and that you have available for that, and that ability to maybe process in much greater throughput than you could before because you've got much greater scale. Those would be some of the items.
Michael, I think we're good.
Okay.
Thank you so much. This
Thank
is
you.
super helpful.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
it. Everybody
Thank
give
you.
Michael a round of applause, please.
Thank you all. Thank you very much.
Thanks for your work.